Okay, your objective for lesson 8 is I will represent parts of one whole as fractions with number bonds. So we're going to be working with number bonds today, and we're going to be taking our fractions and showing them using a number bond. Okay, so on your whiteboard, you're going to write a number bond decomposing 4 into 4 ones. So up at the top of your number bond, you're going to have the number 4. And we're going to decompose, which means break apart or take apart, into 4 different ones. So on your board, you need to draw it where it looks like this. We've got our number 4, and we've broken it apart into 4 different parts because we know that 4 is the same thing as 4 ones. So now we're going to show a number bond decomposing 4 into 2 parts. So what 2 numbers would make 4? So this says that one part needs to have 3 ones. So whenever you're drawing your number bond, it's going to look like this. We've got a 4 at the top. One part is going to be 3, and the other part's going to be 1, because we know that when we put 3 and 1 together, that makes 4. Okay, so now we're going to have a number bond decomposing 1 into 4 unit fractions. Okay, so on your number bond, you're going to have a 1 at the top. And remember, whenever we're working with fractions of number bonds, the 1 is going to stand for the whole. So if it says that we have to decompose this number bond into 4 unit fractions, then that tells me if I were to have a circle, that circle would be my one whole, and I'm going to have 4 unit fractions, so that tells me that my circle is going to have 4 equal parts. So if my circle has 4 equal parts, then what does each one of those parts stand for? And that's what we're going to be putting in our number bond. So since our circle has 4 equal parts, each part is going to be 1/4. So if my circle were to have 4 equal parts, we know that each part would be 1/4. When you're drawing your number bond, it's going to need to look like this. And I do want you to put this on your board because I want you to see what these number bonds look like. So you have to really look at what the directions are and how many parts they're wanting you to break the whole into. So since it said 4 unit fractions, that's going to be 4 fractions with a 1 on the top because we know that the word unit stands for 1. So now we're going to take this same number bond and we're going to make a new number bond out of it. It says work with your partner. You don't have a partner, but we're going to show a number bond decomposing one whole into 2 different parts. So instead of having 4 different parts, we're going to have 2 different parts. One part is going to be composed, which means made of 3 copies of the unit fraction. So if I'm going to have 3 copies, that means I'm going to have 3 of these unit fractions as one fraction. So I'm going to have these fractions right here, if I can get them all circled. These 3 fractions right here as one fraction. So if I have 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4 all together, then you have to ask yourself how many fourths is that? And that's going to be one part of your number bond. And the other part of your number bond is going to be what is left. So on your paper, I want you to make your new number bond, except this number bond is going to have 3 parts as one, and it's going to have this last part by itself. Okay, so this last part, I can get these boxes out of the way, and I said on your paper, but I meant on your board. So this last part of your number bond should have looked like this. Since we had those 3 fourths together, we know that that made 3/4, so you're going to have one whole split up into 3/4, and then the rest of it is 1/4. Because we know that if we put 3/4 and 1/4 together and we had all of that shaded in one circle, then it would give us one whole because all of the parts would be shaded. Okay, so now we're going to have a number bond and we're going to have one whole again, but now we're going to have it using 5 unit fractions. So you're thinking of it as having 5 different parts. And if a circle has 5 different parts, we know that each part is going to be 1/5. So I want you to go ahead and draw the number bond on your board that shows one part, and it's broken into 5 unit fractions. So whenever you have that on your board, you can push play so we can move on. Okay, so it's going to look like this. One whole is broken into 5 equal parts. Each part is 1/5. So now, once again, we're going to take some of these parts and combine them into one part with another part left over. So it says now we're going to decompose the one whole into 2 parts. So instead of having 5 parts coming out from the number bond, we're going to have just 2 parts. It says one of the parts is going to have 2 copies of the 1/5. So that means that we're going to have these 2 parts right here together. And then the other part of the number bond is going to be these other parts. So I'm going to have to move this circle so it's where we can see all of the parts that I'm talking about. If this circle would work. Let me erase that because it's not working. I'm going to use the pen to draw it. Okay, so the rest of the part of the number bond is going to have these 3 left over because it said that this new number bond is going to have 2 different parts. One part is going to have 2 copies of the 1/5, so that leaves us with these 3 parts that are left. So if I have 2 1/5 and I have 3 1/5, you have to ask yourself what fraction does this make and what fraction does this make, and then those are going to be our 2 parts in our new number bond. So I want you to go ahead and draw that on your board to make the new number bond and push play when you're ready. Okay, so one part is going to be 3/5 and one part is going to be 2/5. If you have 2/5 written in this circle and you have 3/5 written in this circle, that's still the same thing. They're just backwards and that doesn't mean anything. It still makes the number bond correct. So we know that one whole is made up of 3/5 and 2/5 because once again, if I were to put 3/5 and 2/5 together in one circle and I were to shade all of that, then it would be one whole. And I'm going to show you real fast what I'm talking about. This time I'm not going to make a circle, I'm going to make a rectangle, and I'm going to break it into 5 equal parts. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and that gives me 5 equal parts. So at first I'm going to shade 3/5, so that's going to be all of this right here. And then the other part of my number bond says that I have 2/5, so that's these last 2 parts right here. So now that you can see what I'm talking about, are all parts of this rectangle shaded. And whenever we have 5 equal parts and all 5 parts are shaded, that shows me that the whole is shaded, so that's where this 1 comes from, because 3/5 and 2/5 together make one whole. Okay, so now we're going to work on the problem set, and we're going to work through this a little bit more, and you need to get that out and get that ready. Whenever you're ready, you can push play to move on. Okay, so these directions say show a number bond representing what is shaded and unshaded in each of the figures. Draw a different visual model that would be represented by the same number bond. So the first one has partially been done for you. On your paper, it may have had something different as the sample, but I covered it up so we could see it just a little bit better, and I wanted to show you how it would be done. So the sample has a long rectangle, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4 parts on the top and 4 parts on the bottom, so that's 8 equal parts. There are 5 parts that are shaded, and there are 3 parts that are not shaded. Okay, so that's where we get this number bond. There is a 1 whole right here. If I had 2 different rectangles, then you would see a 2 at the top. But since I just have 1 rectangle, that means that I have 1 whole. 1 whole is made up of 5/8 and 3/8 because there are 5 parts that are shaded. And we get 3/8 right here because there are 3 parts that are not shaded. So whenever you're making a number bond, you're going to be writing a fraction for what is shaded, and you're going to be writing a fraction for what's not shaded. And we know that if we were to put these 5/8 and these 3/8 together, it would make one entire whole. Okay, so on this, I drew a new visual model. I actually drew two because whenever you're working on this today, it's okay if you are drawing a circle or a rectangle to show the fraction. On your paper, it had 3 parts that were shaded, but that's not, it didn't match what was shaded on the rectangle, so I drew a new circle that has 8 equal parts. And it's showing that there are 5 parts that are shaded. And I also drew a rectangle because once again we can draw a rectangle or a circle to show the whole. And on this one there are 5 equal parts that are shaded. So whenever you're drawing your visual models, whenever you're working with this, you're just going to draw a model to show the parts that are shaded instead of the parts that are not shaded. I don't want you using the same exact models that they have. That's why most of the time it's easier for us to work with circles or rectangles. That's usually the easiest ones that we choose when we're working with fractions. So when we're looking at number 1, we know that this whole entire shape is going to be one whole, so we know that our number bond is going to have a 1 at the top. We know that there are 3 parts that are shaded and that there are 2 parts that are not shaded. So if you had 3/5 in this circle and 2/5 in this circle, that's fine. Both answers would be correct as long as you're telling me what's shaded and what's not shaded. So we were needing to draw a rectangle that had 5 parts, and it needed to have 3 different parts that were shaded because there are 3 parts that were shaded on the shape. The reason that I did not draw a circle having 5 parts, just like I did right here, is because it's not very easy to draw a circle having 5 parts. It's a lot easier to draw a circle having 2 parts or 4 parts or 6 parts or 3 parts or 8 parts, but it's really not very easy to draw a circle having 5 equal parts. It's kind of hard to get it to where they're all equal. So when you're working with the fraction of fifths, it's a lot easier to make sure you're just drawing your rectangle and making that have 5 equal parts. Okay, so this shape is one whole. There are 1, 2, 3 parts that are shaded out of 4 parts total. And there's 1 part that is shaded out of 4 parts total. So our number bond is going to have 3/4 and 1/4. Once again, if you had 1/4 right here and 3/4 right here, that's the same answer. So on this model, we're going to make sure that it has fourths. And once again, you could have drawn a circle or a rectangle. Either one would have been fine as long as there were 4 equal parts, and then you needed to have 3 parts shaded and 1 part that was not shaded. And then moving on to number 3, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equal parts, and this is one whole. Out of 6 parts, there were 3 parts that were shaded and 3 parts that were not shaded. So your number bond had 3/6 and 3/6 because we know that when we put 3/6 and 3/6 together, it makes one whole. You could have had a circle or a rectangle divided into 6 equal parts. There are 3 parts that are shaded on both of the models here. So as long as you had one of these models and you shaded 3 parts, then you're correct. Down here on this one, there are 3, 6, 9 parts. So our number bond has one whole, and there are 2 parts that are shaded and 7 parts that are not shaded. So that's where we get 2/9 and 7/9. And it's not very easy to make 9 equal parts on a circle. So once again, I just drew a rectangle and I shaded 2 parts since this model had 2 parts that were shaded as well. Okay, we're going to move on to the back. I left this one uncovered for you, so you will be drawing this one on your paper. But they're taking the number bonds and they're breaking them apart into 2 different parts, the part that's shaded and the part that's not shaded. But they're also taking the part that is shaded, which is the larger fraction for most of them, or for this one, and they're breaking it apart into all of the unit fractions that it could be made of. So the direction says, show a number bond with two parts, showing the shaded and the unshaded parts of each figure. So that's what this part of the number bond is. And then it says, decompose both parts of the number bonds into unit fractions. So remember, the word decompose is kind of break apart. So they broke apart 3/4 because we know that 3/4 is the same as 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. And since this part that was not shaded is already a unit fraction and it's already just one part, you can't break that apart any further. So this is already decomposed as much as it can be. So for this next shape, well, before you move on to this next shape, make sure you have this written on your paper so you understand what we're going to be doing on the next three shapes for number 5. But for this shape, we've got one hole, so our number bond's going to have one at the top. And the part that is shaded is 2/3, and the part that is not shaded is 1/3. Once again, it doesn't matter if you have 2/3 right here and 1/3 right here because they both mean the same thing. Since this is 1/3 and it's already a unit fraction, we don't have to decompose this at all, but we do need to decompose the 2/3 into 1/3 and 1/3 because we know that 2/3 is made up of 1/3 and 1/3. Okay, moving on to the next shape, there are 4 equal parts in the whole. 2 parts are shaded and 2 parts are not shaded, so that's where we get 2/4 and 2/4. And this time we're having to decompose both of these fractions because we have to break it down into unit fractions. So we know that 2/4 is made of 1/4 and 1/4. And we know that 2/4 is made of 1/4 and 1/4. So we've got all of these unit fractions here for both of those fractions. Okay, so for this fraction, there are 5 equal parts. And we know that that makes the whole, so our number bond's going to have one whole. There's 2 parts that are shaded, and there are 3 parts that are not shaded, so that's 2/5 and 3/5. And when we break apart 2/5 into unit fractions, we have 1/5 and 1/5. And when we break 3/5 into unit fractions, we have 1/5, 1/5, and 1/5, because that altogether is 3/5. So that involved a lot of breaking apart, but it just helps you see a lot better what these fractions are made of. Because when we decompose it, you can see how we get to one whole and how we get to 2/5 or 3/5 or 2/4 whenever we're using unit fractions. Number 6 says the chef put 1/4. Here we go. Yeah. Put 1/4 of the meat on the grill to make one burger, and then he put the rest in the refrigerator. Draw a 2-part number bond showing the fraction of the meat on the grill and then the fraction in the refrigerator. Draw a visual model of all the meat and shade what is in the refrigerator. So you're going to have a number bond, but you're also going to have a visual model, which means you're going to have a circle or a rectangle to show the part that's in the refrigerator. And if it says that he put 1/4 of the meat on the grill, then that bottom number 4 is going to tell you how many parts you have in all. So even though it's not telling you how many you have in all in a sentence, the fraction 1/4 is going to help you figure out what the whole is. So we know that we're going to be working with 4 parts, and we know that he put 1/4 on the grill. So if we're using 1/4 out of all 4 parts, you've got to ask yourself how many parts are left over. So we know that we have a whole, and we know that 1/4 is on the grill. So that's part of our number bond. And if I'm looking at this as a visual model, and let's say I have a rectangle, and I'm going to break it apart into 4 equal parts, and I know that one part is on the grill, then that tells me right here that this part right here is on the grill. Okay, so whenever I look at this and I'm looking at it as a visual model, I see that there's 1, 2, 3 parts left over. So on our number bond, we've got 3/4 that is in the refrigerator. And once again, the 3/4 needs to be decomposed into 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4, so you can see how many unit fractions make up 3/4. So this is what your number bond is going to look like for number 6. You've got 1/4 on the grill and then 3/4 in the refrigerator. And the last part that we have to do is make a visual model to show what was in the refrigerator, and we're going to shade what was in the refrigerator. So here's a rectangle. Once again, if you drew a circle that had 4 equal parts, that's okay. But you needed to have 3 parts that were shaded, since we know that there were 3/4 of the meat in the refrigerator. So the questions say what fraction of the meat was in the refrigerator, and since we had 3 parts shaded out of 4, there was 3/4 of the meat that was in the refrigerator. If you just put 3/4 on this part, I'm fine with that. Part B says how many other such burgers can the chef make from what is in the refrigerator? Well, we know that if we broke this 3/4 apart into different unit fractions, we would have 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. So that would give him 3 other burgers to make out of what was left in the refrigerator. So it says show the refrigerated meat broken into unit fractions on your number bond, and that's what we did up here when we broke 3/4 into 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. Okay, so now you're going to be working on your exit slip. It's going to be a lot of number bonds and breaking apart your number bonds into unit fractions to show what those fractions are made of. So whenever you're finished with this, you need to bring that to me so we can check it.